Charlie, you got most of your people here? You got most of your people here?
Yeah, Shannon Cole just said she's running late, but we'll be here. Who's missing?
Chris.
Commissioner Strand's not here yet. I think most of our committee is here.
Turnberg
though,
isn't here yet. So
Except for,
two
yeah,
commissioners missing, so.
I can, yeah, sure, that'd be great. There are like 13 of them there, so when we run out, we run out.
So Charlie Johnson has been working on this, and members weren't quite sure how we'd do the RFP committee. My commissioners are very interested in this process and very interested in the convention center. So basically, at a commission meeting, we put all 5 commissioners on this committee as well. And that's really, somebody's got to figure out, when I talk to Charlie, is kind of the technical part of it. And then once the technical part of it is assembled or whatever, it may come back to the commissioners and again for a policy decision. But the commissioners, that all 5 of us are in here, we can't make any action items. We can just make comments to what we're thinking or whatever. I think, Charlie, and our expectation is your team will come up with what you think, what do we need, what is it that the space requirements, or what are the different things, which none of us as commissioners are experts at. So it would be your technical team that would kind of outline that, Charlie. So Michael and I have talked about different ways of managing that, and that's part of what today's discussion, this is kind of organizational meeting today, what we have to do. So just for everybody here, I think we'll just go around and introduce ourselves so we kind of know who the people are that we're dealing with. Charlie, if that'd be okay?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm Tim Mahoney, the mayor. Jim?
Jim Gilmore, city staff.
Mike Rethinger, city staff.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission.
Taylor Snelling, owner of Mezzaluna.
Kent Kolstad, president at Livewire.
Joe Raso, Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC.
Claire Hughes, the GM of the Clubhouse Hotel and Suites, and I'm the vice chair on the CVB Board of Directors.
I'm Charlie Johnson. I'm the president and CEO at Visit Fargo Moorhead.
Mallory Ackerman, Director of Convention Sales at Visit Fargo Moorhead.
Emma McIntyre, Manager of Development at Folkways.
Kate Ballstead, Events and Marketing Specialist for the Southeast Education Cooperative.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission.
Very good. So Charlie, I think we're going to have you kind of run the meeting today, if that's okay. And
I'd be happy to try.
And if I see you overstepping bounds, I'll step in, but otherwise we'll let you kind of go your direction.
It could easily happen because I have no idea what the bounds are. So yeah, we wanted to get together. I'm glad we did the introductions first. Shannon Full is on her way. She's going to be on the committee too. She had another meeting that ran long, so she'll be, you'll see her when she comes in. Most people know her anyway. I think everybody else is here, so that's great. Thank you all. First of all, thanks to everybody on the committee who agreed to participate in this. This is a pretty big project, and we're looking forward to coming up with something we can build in the city in a public-private partnership with some developers and builders around the community. I'm anxious to see, once we get this first part of the process done, to see who shows up. I have heard from lots of people who have lots of ideas and different possible locations, so I'm optimistic that we're going to have some good options when the time comes going forward to choose from. So it's going to be pretty interesting. So the process basically is, and again, the mayor, correct me if you think this is wrong or anyone jump in, the process is for us to establish what we think the requirements should be, the minimum requirements, including things like space, site considerations, parking, access. These also are things that will end up being part of the criteria we use to choose a project in the end once the RFPs have been submitted. In that RFP, probably we'll want background on partners. We'll want to know about the financing and ownership approach. A little background, the last time I talked to Susan Thompson, the finance director for the city of Fargo, we felt that we know that the lodging tax currently, each penny, each 1% of the lodging tax earns a little over $1 million. I think it was like $1.1 million last year. We think this year is going to be flat. We've had a lot of growth the last couple of years, but I might be wrong. It's early yet. Just using the round figure of $1 million or $1.1 million, Susan updated with interest rates that had come down a little bit last fall. and could still come down, but probably not in the real near future. But we figured that $1 million, $1.1 million, she thought we could bond up to $17.5 million against each 1.1 million. So theoretically, that's like 52 million, something like that, that will be available. Now, my personal belief, and we'll hash this out as we go through, is that we need to save some of that tax money out for operating subsidies once the building is up and running. So I'm thinking more in terms of once we get to the point where we know what project we're after, we'll do another look into the bonding process, which I don't know anything about, and we'll defer to city staff on that and see what kind of money is available. Hopefully, saving out, I would hope, a half penny of that every year for operating subsidies and potential maintenance down the road. Throughout the campaign, people would say, will it make money? No, a convention center by itself is not likely to make money. The Fargo Dome makes money or has historically made money. It's kind of an anomaly in the world of arenas and convention centers and places like that. We don't anticipate this making money, certainly not in the near term once it's up and running. If it broke even someday, that would be wonderful. But the idea of providing this to the community is to bring more business into town, to increase the amount of visitor spending in the community so the community benefits from this. Businesses like Taylor's and Kent's benefit from this by bringing people into the community. So I do feel quite strongly we need to keep some money out for subsidies going forward. We'll readdress those issues when the time comes. So I think we're looking at basically when we talk to these developers, somewhere in the $40 to $43 million perhaps for bonding, at least as it stands right now. And that would be the nut we would be thinking of passing off to them. Any questions so far? Okay, so things we need to decide on. We'll pick another meeting date later, hopefully a regular one. But first of all, we need to think in terms of minimum space requirements. I would hope that this committee at some point, perhaps in March, would be willing, at least some of you, to take a road trip, perhaps to St. Cloud and Rochester, to see the convention facilities there. They are kind of similar to what we have in mind. Not exact sizes probably, but we get an idea of how those operate so we could see some of those. Another option is we could invite some builders to come in at some point in our process before we make the final decision on the RFP, just to ask them some questions and find out what kind of, just questions and hear what questions they have about the process before they may or may not bid on this. But we do need to talk about minimum space requirements. Mallory and I have figures in our head, and I think Claire from our Visit Fargo-Moorhead board knows what they are. Ultimately, the cost of construction at the time we start construction will have some impact on what kind of space we have. But we've felt pretty strongly that we need a couple different ways to parse this, and we've had this discussion in our office the last couple of weeks, or this week in particular. After talking with consultants at HVS, who work on this kind of stuff and whom we've worked with in the past for studies. We've been thinking in terms of we need a 50,000 square foot, at least a 50,000 square foot dividable room that can serve as ballroom space and or exhibit space. The idea being that we could have up to 25,000 square feet for general sessions and lunches and another 25,000 square feet at least for exhibit space. Those are two of the legs of the stool that we don't have right now. We can't do both of those things in one spot right now. And then additionally, we would need, I would hope, at least 20,000 square feet of what we would call breakout space, smaller meeting spaces for the side meetings that happen. All of you have been to conferences and you know that they have general sessions and then they break into like 2 or 3 different breakouts at a time. We need anywhere from 6 to 12 of those rooms, maybe. And of course, they can be different configurations because usually these rooms are built to be divided in different ways. When I've talked to our friends at HVS, they have, when I talk to them about the 50,000 square foot room, they get kind of depressed and say, well, we have to call that a multi-purpose room. And but it's ballroom space and exhibit space. He says, yeah, it's really a multi-purpose room. So you may want to think in terms of 25,000 square feet of exhibit and 25,000 square feet of ballroom space That's one of the things that we'll discuss going forward, and maybe we can ask some people some questions about that. But I feel strongly that we need those two size of spaces. Of course, those rooms can be divided again into smaller rooms because we want to be flexible to be able to use this for different things. Our sports team, we know this is not a sports facility, and it's not going to be designed as a sports facility. But our sports team would be remiss if they didn't remind us that if you have a 50,000 square foot room and the ceilings are high enough and there's a weekend that it's available, they could put something like volleyball or cheer competition or dance competition in there. So that's just one of the things that's percolating in our minds as well, because we want to get maximum usage out of this facility when it's up and running. So we'll be talking about space requirements, site considerations, then we'll talk about recommended hotel sizes. Welcome, Shannon. Shannon Full, everybody. How big a hotel we need. We've been talking in terms of something in the neighborhood of 150 to maybe a minimum of 150 to 200 hotel rooms associated with this facility, which would be the private part, obviously, the major private part of the thing. A question so far?
Charlie, can
Joe.
I ask, as this has been thought through and we're looking at setting these criteria and I assume providing maybe weights to different aspects of it, maybe that's
Yes,
not
yeah.
part of it. How much of our thinking goes into the convention center and the importance of that in this decision versus all the other accessories or amenities or other things? Because you just mentioned the hotel, it feels like that's a absolute requirement. But there's been talk in the community about other things that go in and could go into this. And so I'm just curious on the front end, how much of the weight is placed really on our focus on the convention center and its utilization versus other pieces?
Well, I think you're right. I think the hotel is an absolute requirement. You want to have a hotel attached to this facility wherever it is. And I think I would love that we could prepare the RFP in such a way that it leaves some leeway for the people who bid to talk about the hotel and other amenities they might want to have in it. Certainly the location will be a factor. We'll have to set a list of criteria for how we want it, and that's one thing this committee can do. What we think are the important things and how much weight we're going to give each one, so we have a system when things come in. I think generally, Michael and Jim, that's probably the way things work. You do some comparisons that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be the be-all and end-all answer, but it gives you a guideline as to what might be the best proposal. So I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly, but
Yeah, I mean, we're early.
yeah,
so
we're early. All of these things are factors, if that's what you're asking. I think,
Yeah.
location's going to be important, accessibility from a driving standpoint.
For convention use.
For convention use, yes. That is the number one thing that this is about. Conventions, yes, that's the number one. Other uses would be after that, but there will be other uses for sure. And we fully expect there'll be some local use of it. It won't be just, outside conventions, but it won't be busy constantly with conventions. So you want to make it affordable for the chamber. May want to put some events in there if it has a large enough ballroom. NDSU might want to use it for some things if it has a large enough ballroom. Anybody in the community, in the metro, would be able to use it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that always brings people from out of town. We want it to be a facility that gets used a good percentage of the time.
And before I forget, you commented about this multi-purpose. I read that maybe as a concern, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I read your language, meaning did the consultants say, boy, if you really had 50,000 that was ballroom, or 40,000 or 30,000, not 50,000 that's divisible, that helps or hurts? So can you just speak to that real
Well,
quick?
Tom Hazinski, the guy we have worked with at HVS, made it seem like a concern to me. I wasn't concerned about it until he said maybe he was. Kate might have some comments on that. I don't know that where it comes up is when you're comparing it to other facilities. Because he did a little rundown comparing to some other facilities for us earlier this year, or last year, I should say. Hard for me to believe it's already 2025, but he did a little comparison, and this is where I noticed it. He compared us to other facilities like Duluth and St. Cloud and other places, and he split out ballroom space and exhibit space. And then, but where he put in the hypothetical that I was asking him for, it just said 50,000 square feet of exhibit space. And I said, well, that's not right. We can do ballroom. It'd be 25 and 25. He says, yeah, it's a multipurpose room. You can't sell it that way. So,
Charlie, when you look at the Great Hall, the Holiday Inn, how many square feet is that?
the Great Hall of the Holiday Inn is 11,000 square feet about. The
11,000, wow.
The Crystal Ballroom at the Delta is the largest single ballroom in the community. That's 15,000 square feet. The Holiday Inn, all in, including that 11,000, is 27,000 square feet of meeting space. The Delta has about 23,000. So this is part of the problem. We have 15,000 square feet as the largest ballroom, can't even handle some local events that we have. So we need a 25,000 square foot potential ballroom. And then in addition, if you have 15,000 square feet of ballroom, even if that's enough for your meeting at one of these hotels, 15 or 11,000, they don't have a matching amount of exhibit space. So that's why we need to have that. So these to me, these things seem a little semantic, and we need to pin down from him. I will try to pin down from him more, and maybe Kay can help us with that. What do you think as a meeting planner? If you see it's 50,000 square feet, but it's dividable into 25 and 25, does that scare you away or what?
No, and honestly, for our events, we wouldn't need like a full 50,000 square foot
Right.
For just meeting space. With the amount of attendees we would have, would 250, 300, maybe even getting up to 400. So I think the dividable space would be useful for us particularly.
Yeah.
Can I just chime in on that real quick?
Ken.
The Alaris Center, as an example, in Grand Forks, I would say maybe is what is being referred to in terms of like a multi-purpose type of space that might be scaring them away. It's going to be a similar size. You can host, say, a ballroom-style show on one side of their, 5-ballroom layout, and then have an expo trade show type situation in the maybe south half of that, or divide it in a number of different ways.
Right.
I'm not scared off by the terminology that's being presented here in any sort of way. And, as I think about this, even in a much larger facility in terms of footprint, Bismarck Event Center, their larger convention space, there again, we can have a ballroom style show in a third of it or a quarter of it, and then have an expansive trade show too in the rest of that remaining space that's directly connected. So I like the idea of being able to sort of subdivide with air walls, that type of thing, but I don't know that the terminology like ballroom versus multipurpose room really has any play to the conversation here. So.
Okay, that's good, because you've worked in a lot of facilities all over the country, so, yeah, okay. So these are some of the things we need to address. I think perhaps, the question is, what it really will come down to, and the reason I even brought it up is, it depends on how we want to describe it in the RFP. And I think there's probably a way we can write it to say, we need 25,000 square feet for this and 25,000 for that, but it could be contiguous and it could be one room. That's just the kind of thing I want us to think about, and give them some leeway. I don't think we want to pin these people who might bid down in any particular, too tightly into one design. We want them to design it. So if we tell them what the space needs are, maybe they'll come up with something creative for us in that regard. Yeah.
Charlie, I think the other part of this is as you allow for that creative licensure, it's going to open the bidding process, so you'll have more developers to bid on it. So I think that the identifying what's the absolute essential, what could be some ideal or ideas, and then allowing them to have that creative licensure is going to be really important as we go forward.
Yes, exactly. That's what we want, exactly. We want to leave some flexibility. Tell them the minimum space requirements, but leave flexibility. And I think that also is going to apply to the management of this facility. We don't necessarily want to tie them to any particular management. We want to know what they think they would do. It's conceivable you could get a bid from one place that would say, we'll build it with a hotel, and we'll manage the whole thing for you. And then we would have to strike a deal with them, the city would have to strike a deal with them on how the money flows. Obviously, the city's going to own the facility, I think, and although there might be other mechanisms, but the city's going to be funding it, so I've been telling everyone, I assume the city will have ownership of the convention facility. Management is open to question, and I think that's what we should leave open as a possibility for them. They can decide how they think it should be managed, and if they want to come back to the city and ask for help with management of it, then we would negotiate that once we get to the end of the process.
That might be a question. Eric, you're online because it's taxes going into doing it. How much presence does the city of Fargo have to have in then managing this facility? Eric, are you there? Yeah, that would be the question, because we're collecting money and we're putting it over to that, to your model where you said, well, they could quote run it and do it. I'm just curious, Eric, is there oversight the city would have to have?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is if we're issuing tax exempt financing, tax exempt bonds, there might be some limitations on how the project is managed, at least thus far, the very preliminary conversations with our bond lawyers. I think the thinking is there are enough entanglements with tax exempt features of this kind of facility that we'd probably just plan to issue taxable bonds. Then you don't need to worry about those things you're talking about, Mayor. So I think it may be that we just issue taxable bonds and we'll avoid the entanglements. We dealt with that, for example, with the Fargo Dome. I mean, 30 years ago, if you look in the ordinance, we say you can't issue any debt without talking to bond counsel. It was for that reason that you had some management contracts that if the management firm took too much profit, that becomes a private activity and you can't have tax exempt bonds with it. So that's what that is. Regarding with ownership, Charlie, I do fully expect that the city ultimately will own the project once it's completed. Maybe the developer builds the project, then in turn deeds it over to the city. But it's possible that you could have some other arrangement where they own it for a while. Ultimately, it becomes city owned, but that might be after 30 years or something. So there's some flexibility in that may help proposers as well. And we can talk about that in due course.
Okay, thank you. Eric, I'm sorry we didn't introduce you at the beginning. I didn't see you on the screen.
Oh, that's all right.
I forgot about Eric. He's going to be vital to this.
Charlie.
That's all right. I'm used to it.
You talk about, the sales tax and the amount of revenue that would go into building the convention center. You mentioned the management piece of that and looking for options. It was just talked about that the city is likely to own this at some point in time. Now you have ongoing maintenance costs, and I'm just curious at some point in time, making sure we cover, if that's appropriate in this process, how that is going to be viewed and taken care of, because obviously those are things that a facility like this is going to have, and you want to make sure you cover, which I think is separate from operational cost if it's a third party. So,
yeah, that's a good question. We're thinking in terms of at least $500,000 a year for operating subsidies. Will that be enough to cover maintenance? Maybe in the first few years. Down the road, you're going to need some fund for that, so we can talk about that. Maybe we need to save more out. Or maybe a fund needs to be set up. And again, I think that's possibly something that the bidders could weigh in on when the time comes, I hope. But we can talk about that some more as well. Other questions and comments?
I just think the committee has to be clear, Charlie. It was questioned whether you do performing arts. And I think it's been clear from Eric and other people, when we voted on it, is convention center. And when we've looked at performing arts, Dave and I looked at it a long time, Denise looked at it. The cost of a performing arts, I think, was 70 to 80 million as we got closer and closer to those elements. And it was questioned just at the commission meeting. I bring it up only to make clear that we are only doing a convention center. And I would hope that you help Commissioner Strand understand that, because what you're building cannot do dual purpose. You just really cannot do that.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure as you have these discussions, we do that. Secondary question comes up, could you tear down the Civic Center, and is a footprint big enough that you could put a convention center there? And I don't know how big that is, so.
I think that's something that we would see what some developers came up with. If someone thought that was an idea, they would probably reach out to the city and talk about that, probably as part of this process. I think I appreciated very much Commissioner Strand's interest in and desire in someday having a performing arts center in this community. We all would like that. Michael Redlinger and I worked on for many months before and into the pandemic, and you guys were involved as well, trying to come up with, a philanthropic portion of that to go with some form of city funding. But again, as you said, it'd be like an $80 million project at least in this day and age. So if the city could come up with $40 million of funding, similar to what we have, but not enough to build both a convention center and a performing arts center, then perhaps some philanthropic money could come too. But that, again, is not what this project is about. The voters approved this for convention space. Dave, were you going to say something? Okay. I saw you leaning in. I saw you aiming, but okay. So beyond that, I think we don't really, I think we should probably gather some materials. For instance, Mallory has a list here that we had put together a couple of years ago of I did not hand that out to you, sorry, but it shows you what the competitive aspects are that we're up against when we talk about space. Kent, you mentioned the Alaris Center in Grand Forks. They have a dividable 25,588 square foot ballroom, which again is bigger than anything we have right now in one place. And then they have another 11,400 square feet of meeting space. So they've got about 37,000 square feet of meeting space. Plus, of course, they have that 80,000 square foot arena if they need it for something. And they have a 200-room hotel attached. In Sioux Falls, which, by the way, I have heard is talking about building a different true convention center, but in their current facility, they have a 50,000 square foot ballroom, dividable, and another 10,000 plus square feet of a meeting space, plus some arena floors. St. Cloud River's Edge, which is one I think that we might want to go see, has 150,000 total square feet. They have a 16,000 square foot ballroom, but a 60,000 square foot exhibit space. So some people do think you actually need more exhibit space than ballroom space, which is something we can look at and leave open again for the people who bid. Skywalks to hotels, and then they have 19 smaller meeting rooms to go with that. Duluth has a couple different options. They have three small convention centers smaller ones built into one. On the harbor side, they have a 12,000 square foot ballroom plus 5 meeting rooms. City side, they have a 26,000 square foot ballroom plus 9 meeting rooms and a 15,000 square foot exhibit hall. Pioneer Hall there is 48,250 square feet. They have another one that's 8,000 square feet, and then they have 2 ice arenas attached to it. So they have different spaces. Yes, sir.
So now I do have a question, if that's okay, Charlie. So would it be possible to get the calendars, especially from St. Cloud and Sioux Falls, just those facilities, just to show what they do? That would be good for all of us to see. And then also just the budget, for staffing and what it costs to run those 2 buildings, because to me, those are pretty close to what we're looking at. And just from the financial standpoint, what does it cost to run? What are the profits? Where do you get income from and things like that? So if like for all of us to see that, I think that'd be good, especially the ones that are close to us. Thank you.
Sorry. we will ask both St. Cloud and Rochester for that because they're slightly different size facilities. I may also reach out to my friends in Des Moines. They have a larger convention center, but they could perhaps give us some information on that too. But yeah, what kind of things show up in these centers and what kind of financial loss are they operating under? I've talked to a couple of them. Yes.
The document that Charlie is reading from is a PDF that we actually have attached on our website. It's on fargomoorhead.org/convention-center. So it's a lot of information there. I mean, obviously I've printed a whole lot of it too, but it's meetings that we've lost over the years, things that we could potentially, could outgrow the spaces that we currently have. So if you want to reference some of that information, it is on that website.
Yeah, but we can get usage info from those facilities. They're all public operations, and they've been very helpful to us so far, and will continue to be. And as I said, it might be fun for us to go visit a couple of those, just to see how they operate.
And Charlie, maybe one just to add to the list further away, just a former community of mine just finished their build of the Fox Cities, one in Appleton, Wisconsin, and that one's a pretty, it's got the multipurpose rooms, but it also has a very intriguing outdoor space that is used for some of this as well. So that just might be another one to add to the list.
Yeah. So those are the kind of outdoor space, that's the kind of amenity that we would hope that whoever the bidders are will include some information on that sort of thing, you know, and it will relate largely to where they're going to, what location they pick for the place. So that would be interesting to find out. Okay. Okay. So those are the things we need to talk about. I think, Mayor, are you okay with us meeting on Friday mornings on a regular basis here? Does that work for you? I know you have conflicts every other Friday probably, right?
Actually, I think we seem to tonight to find a time, but I also want to have it such that the commissioners can, if they would want to come or see it online, they could see it, Charlie. It may be Friday afternoon or it may be a Thursday, but we can do a search and find a good time for everybody. That's the only concern I have, is since they did want to be participations, we do that a little bit. So we will try to find that. I think what you want to do is set a weekly meeting. So
would like
think
to,
that's
yeah.
what everybody wants. So if that is okay, we can search for that and try to get that set up by Monday, Tuesday next week, then know the dates we're doing.
Okay. One of the reasons I like the Fridays or Mondays, because when people travel, it's usually during the middle of the week. So just something to keep in mind and see what's available.
And Charlie, you mentioned visiting. I'd be interested in that. I think being on the ground and seeing things face to face and talking to people. So getting something like that scheduled for this committee. And
We'll work on that, yeah. Yeah, and again, we understand this is a pretty large committee, especially with the 5 commissioners on it, 14 on the committee technically. We know that we all have lives, and some people will, like Eric will frequently call in, others can call in too, and sometimes you just have to miss a meeting. We'll try to keep everybody informed as best we can. That's why I think it would be great to just pick a regular meeting time and then do the best we can, because it's kind of, we can't really do a doodle poll every week for a group this size. So and that's a lot to ask. So I think the best thing is to pick a date. So we'll work on that and see if it's, and try to let you know by, you know, like next Tuesday, when the next meeting will be, and then hopefully we can stick with that as a meeting schedule. In the meantime, we'll check with our friends in Rochester and Duluth and see when we could come to see them. St. Cloud, I'm sorry, not Duluth. So, yeah.
So the timetable, Charlie, is important for this group because the commission would like to see an RFP come out of this group sometime. I think your idea of meeting weekly to get that is almost in 30 days, you would theoretically have something to show us?
I think that would be, you know, I've become less pessimistic about this in the last couple of weeks. I think maybe it won't take as long as I think it will to decide what the things we want in here are. And then it would become a question of Mr. Gilmer over there, who will work with Michael and other city staff to write the RFP. Is that correct, Jim? Can you give us an idea of how long, once you get the things that belong in it, how you go about that process and how long you think it would take you to craft that?
I mean, I think we could draft it in a couple of weeks. I think you've got a real good start here with, you know, this. It's just putting those things in and getting it circulated to give everyone kind of a week to respond. That, you know, there's some questions and that, you know, I can know developers will ask about, and I'll just go ahead and bring it up now, but they will likely ask for, will there be any tax incentives that might go to the hotel or adjoining properties? And we don't need to, I think we just need to have an idea, yes, we're open to that, or no, the door is closed. I think we should be open to that. That might help enhance the facility if you get a hotel attached. They could have had their own meeting space, which might be able to cut down on what you would have to own. So,
Yeah, so you would want to include something about that in the RFP,
yes.
saying that the city would be open to that? Is that what you're saying? Dave?
And any direction from the commission before I would suggest they put that in there.
So I have a question for Charlie. So the hotel, is that a requirement that that be part of the convention space? That's my question for you.
I feel very strongly that a hotel should be attached to it. So, you know, some people would call it integrating it. It might be more intertwined with the convention space, but I think attached, so you don't have to go outside to get from that particular hotel to the convention space, is a requirement that we want, and that's what most meeting planners would really like, you know. We talk about 150 to 200 rooms. We don't want, right, Claire, we don't want 500 rooms attached to this because we want to achieve what they call compression around the community, correct? Could you tell us how that works a little bit? How your philosophy works on that?
How my philosophy works,
Yeah.
my philosophy. I don't really know if it's philosophy, but,
I mean,
but yes.
Tell us how it works.
How many rooms do we have in the market right now?
5,500.
And if you were to give me a number, Mallory, how many sold out-ish events do we have currently?
Sold out events for conferences?
Well, in terms of, I mean, I think of like a Big Iron
Citywide
or,
sellouts.
yeah, citywide sellouts. That's the term.
Most of those citywide sellouts are all sports right now.
Yeah.
We don't have any conventions that are
Exactly.
going to sell out. Besides, I mean, there's Big Iron would be one, and
The marathon sometimes.
well, yeah, that's sporting events is obviously what we do for citywides.
Right, so that would be the goal in my hotel bubble,
For-
is to drive more, yes, compression for
Exactly.
that to
The
occur.
vocabulary of citywide is obviously filling all properties
Yes.
to as max as we can.
So if you have a hotel that's connected, that's 500 rooms, that leaves the tiny fish a little further away, and the majority of the hotels in the market are around the 100 to 125, I would say, is the average size. So yes, location would go into it a lot for us. But once you put a property that's 150 would probably be what I would say, yeah, 200 probably tops.
Of course, the compression is going to happen no matter what. Even if you had 400 rooms, that's going to drive other business for that weekend somewhere else. But we still want, I don't think we want a hotel that can house everything that comes to that meeting. We want to help the hotel community in general by creating more of those citywide sellout events.
If I can make a generalization, typically most convention planners are asking for their exhibitors to be on site to have their, you know, their rooms connected. But otherwise their attendees might want to be, you know, in different areas of the community so that they can, you know, see and do things too. So
Yeah, you definitely, they like their exhibitors, and of course, they want the leaders of the group to be able to stay there. But ultimately, you've all been to conferences, and no matter how big they are, usually there's more than one hotel that is assigned as a host hotel. So yeah, 150 to 200 seems right to me.
So with that being said, that the hotel's a requirement, I think back to the question maybe, or the comment Jim brought up about incentivizing that as part of the package. Has there been discussions with the commission that would be inclusive or open? And then as a follow-up, what have the commission's discussions been about offering additional incentive partnerships with the city for other aspects of the project?
Dave, on the Tax Incentive Committee, do you have a policy that would handle this?
Well, to answer your question, Joe, we haven't had any discussions about offering incentives, and I do think it's you have to have that discussion. And the other thing is, I can already tell you, the other hotel are going to give us pressure by giving an incentive to a new hotel. Do you know what I mean? They're going to see that as a competitive advantage. So I do think we have to address that and have some type of discussion about it. I don't know if you agree, but that's an issue. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and I do think the holistic thing about the incentive for this property too, if it's a city-run property. So there's a lot of financial things besides just the tax that we need to discuss, and I think that's kind of that's part of our job, I believe, as this group too.
Yeah, and I think, the impression I got from Jim is that you kind of want to leave it open as a possibility, but you're not necessarily going to offer it in the RFP. I don't know how you want to mention it. I don't know any developers who would be shy about asking for that, whether it was in the RFP or not, right?
Can I say,
Yeah,
Charlie, if,
I think what some developers have, when they've been pitching different ideas or talking about it is, that new hotel is going to create a new property tax base. And so should the revenue from that new property tax base perhaps go into the facility to provide some additional resources, to make the public facility nicer, or deal with the parking, shared parking or something like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an incentive that goes into the benefit of the hotel owner, but there's going to be additional property tax base. And should that be diverted back into making the facility even better, or, adding some open space or some other amenities on the site, should you suggest to developers that that's the only way we'll use any incentive is to enhance the project, not to necessarily enhance their bottom line on the hotel?
Okay, so we may or may not do that.
well, I just say that it seems to me, if I were a developer, I'd want a good idea of where the city's going to land on this. And your comment, Jim, I think, for me anyway, rings pretty positively. If a developer knew that area and how that additional tax could be used to support the project, the TIF essentially, making that decision as a commission on the front end, I think is going to be really important as a developer building in their proposal, regardless of what that proposal is. I see Shannon nodding on that too. And the other thing I just throw in is the consideration of how is the lodging tax been considered with this new property as well as a potential incentive, or not, because it's already been calculated in paying off the bonds. I don't know if that's happened.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that last
Meaning
question.
like you've got 200 room, let's say hotel,
yeah.
and you're going to have lodging tax on that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you have extra lodging tax because of the passage of the lodging tax.
Yeah, no.
Because any of right?
Yeah,
does
there
that
will be.
does that go? Does that go? Has
Yeah.
that been calculated of going into the pool that pays the bonds, or has that been not calculated and there's those resources that could be used in a different way?
Well, the lodging tax will grow, it'll be 6% once the 3% is put on it. Both the whole lodging tax will grow, and I would anticipate from that standpoint, sure, it's going to lead to improvements in the money that.
Right, and what I'm getting at is if that 1.1 million calculation does not include
Growth?
the new hotel and its taxes in that area to support the convention center, because you're saying the convention center has a requirement of a hotel.
Yeah.
I'm not throwing these up for
Yeah.
saying that it
No.
should be done. It's just consideration because of what Jim brought up with the actual piece of land from a property tax value. There's also a lodging tax because there's going to be a hotel on it because it's required.
Can I just jump in real quick, Charlie? That's the important thing is to make sure that this is included when these bidders are making their proposals. This has to be part of the conversation. And to me, we shouldn't say it's automatically included or excluded. This should be part of the conversation that each of the proposals will be willing to listen, but it's complicated, how we participate as a city and how much financial participation we have. It's going to get complicated. And so, but that's the importance of having this all out in the open. But I think we can either include or exclude. And I apologize for making it so complicated, but it's part of the thing.
No, I think the simplest way would be to, Jim can decide with you guys how he wants to approach it, but you could put something in there that says this might be a possibility if you have a proposal in mind, but we're not saying this goes with it, right? Is that what you're saying?
And so if I can ask, so like Shannon has experience in Appleton, in St. Cloud, in Duluth, in Sioux Falls, what did they do? Because I think we should at least see what their participation was as a city. And so we can get that, because they're all public entities. And so, but I do think that would help us too.
Yeah, we'll ask them for sure. Mm-hmm.
And if I could just add,
Hi,
Charlie, thanks-
Charlie.
I was just to say, just real briefly, thanks.
Hang,
for the-
hang on, Eric. Michael wants to say something first.
Just thanks for the good discussion. Briefly, too, I would say, as a due diligence activity for the city of Fargo, we will be engaging some third-party review and assistance. We work with professional financial advisors in Baker Tilly and PFM. We're going to need that assistance as we look at that pro forma. And so if we find other pro formas from other entities and cities, we'll absolutely look at that. I appreciate Commissioner Pepcorn's point, because we need to really make sure that we understand eyes wide open what's happening there, and getting financial assistance and guidance on that from a good consultant will help us do that. So the city will be doing that.
Eric?
Yeah, Charlie and Mayor and Commissioner Pepcorn, just kind of building on what Jim was saying, rather than be kind of too abstract about it. I mean, we do have policies in place that provide assistance to any developer. You know, our tax increment financing policy, for example, allows the city to identify a blighted area, something that, needs to be renewed, urban renewal, right? And so we provide public assistance in the form of tax increment financing to cover the added cost to, demolish an existing building and do site improvements. And maybe you have to pay a little bit more for the land because the marketplace doesn't value it at zero, and it's going to be actually a cost to demolish and so forth. So those kinds of tax increment financing policies, and we also use pilot for some of the same thing, are already in place for any developer that comes in and happens to have a proposal. I think the question is, how do you feather those policies into this RFP? So when you say that things might be available, I think the city commission needs to think about this and decide exactly how they're going to approach it. And maybe there needs to be a tweak to the policy relative to this kind of proposal. But just to put some framework around the notion, we do have established programs and policies that provide assistance in figuring out what's available for any particular proposal.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Just so the committee understands, typically what do is tax incentive committee would look at it, and if it looked like they could build the hotel and do okay, normal finances, there would be no reason for us to do that. But like Eric's point, it's like blight. We do want a hotel next to the convention center, so the city's we want this to be successful. It may be blight we're addressing, where we're just addressing, we feel it to be a better product if we had it. But what we're saying, I think the commission's had no policy on this. It would just be, we would look at each individual proposal, and that they said we'd like to entertain tax increment financing with this hotel, then it would have to go through the tax incentive committee to see if it qualifies. And most developers kind of know how that works. But I think it's a different thing to Eric's point, blight or buying land. It's more that we would want the co-development with the convention center to be successful. But, and then the other thing, Jim, right, like some of the tax release, in a sense, could be utilized to improve the area as well. So there could be some advantages of doing some type of tax break to get a better product at the end. But that would have to go through our committee, and then it would go through commission. We do have policies for many of them, and then they're scored. So when Mike talked about that, we use a financial advisor looks at it. And we always had the question, but for, would you do it if you didn't get this? And that's what we'd have to prove as a commission, that it needs it to go forward. So,
yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about including that in this. I mean, it has come up in some discussions with people, but I always tell them that's not really what we're talking about. It would have to be a separate request going through the typical channels. My view is it's a pretty good deal for the developer to have the city kick $42 or $43 million into building a facility that's going to bring a lot of people to their hotel. So I don't necessarily think that we need to sweeten it, at least ahead of time. I think we probably want to see what comes in based on what we're offering in the first place. I mean, it's a pretty good deal, isn't it? I mean, we're asking developers to, yes, make a commitment of their own, a private commitment, but they're going to be attached to a building that we know is going to bring business into the community, right? How do you feel about that, Claire? Am I channeling you on this? Yeah. So, not to say you would never do it, but I don't know that we necessarily want to put it in the RFP. We can discuss that as we go on. And you guys, smarter minds than mine, which are at this table.
Some general questions have been asked, to me is, would the city, use TIF money to build a parking garage that would benefit both the convention center and the hotel? Would the city use, TIF money to help demolish a blighted or an underutilized property to make the redevelopment, more feasible, or, add some outdoor amenity, next to it? So those are the kind of questions I think are going to come up. So I thought I'd just start to raise them today.
I don't think all the proposals are going to be on what you would call blighted properties, but that certainly is an option for some of them, I suppose, yeah. Okay, we got a lot of stuff to do. We're going to get information on finances for those other facilities. We're going to try to pick a date where we can take a bus to, if we're going to go to both St. Cloud and Rochester, we might have to stay overnight in Rochester, I think, or one of the places anyway. Exactly, yeah, we can have our meeting in the convention center, see how it works. It'll be great. So I'm going to try to look into sometime in March for that. I know weather obviously becomes a factor when still in March, but we'll try to find some dates that would work for both of those facilities and make that one of our weekly meetings would be the trip down there. In the meantime, we'll try to get that information from them. Yeah, Mallory's taking notes for me, thank you. And Kimber's taking notes too, but she's got a to-do list over here. So, yeah, so I guess what I would ask the committee to do in the meantime is to think about these things we've discussed and rattle around in your brains how you feel about the idea of this. One thing we didn't approach, I'm looking at Taylor there, and I thought restaurants. We want to require this to have, it's going to have at least a good catering kitchen in it. And you can help us decide if it has to have a catering kitchen or a primary kitchen. I think catering issues will depend a lot on what each developer bids. They may want to do it all themselves, which we don't necessarily have to let them do, but anyway, the space has to include a catering kitchen of some kind for that, so you can bring food in. You guys have had experience with that. And then storage space, in addition to the meeting space. Then you need pre-function space for registrations, cocktail parties, things like that. And so storage, kitchen, pre-function, and then loading dock facilities. Think in terms of that, Kent, I know that would be on your mind. But if you're going to have exhibit space, you have to have at least one good loading dock. I have friends who have been in the event business, and they said, you should really have two. But for this size of facility, I don't know if as long as we have one good one that works, and they say it should be on the main level too, so you don't have to use elevators, which is something to think about. So anyway, these are the kind of things we're discussing.
Excluding the hotel with all those numbers you threw out, what's that ballpark look like for square footage under roof?
So if we have, I'm thinking 70 to 80 or 90, 70 to 80,000 square feet probably of meeting space in the facility. 70 probably being the minimum, and then whatever square footage is necessary for those others. So you're probably looking at 100 to 110,000 square feet. Kent, you've had more experience with this.
I'd say approximately that, yeah, between 110, 130,000, more than likely.
All things included.
Loading dock space, thinking about catering kitchen, those types of elements, pre-function, et cetera, et cetera. Speaking in terms of loading dock, right? How many vendors do you have in the building? How many events do you have going on in the building? We could have one singular loading dock area, but do we have, space for multiple trucks, multiple deliveries coming in on the catering side, exhibit side, that type of thing? Granted, we're not talking about a terribly large facility, to your point, when it comes to convention centers at large, but there will be activity that I think justifies multiple bays, good service hallways, good storage space, all that.
Yeah. Okay.
Charlie, can you share a little bit more about the attached RFP on this document? Just some additional context on it?
This was just a sample that I received from our friends at HVS. It's from about 8 or 9 years ago, so he felt safe sending it out. I changed the names to protect the innocent to us. I even put Michael Redlinger's name in there. Sorry, Michael. So it's just a sample of one that they did.
Okay.
It looks to me like it covers a lot of the things that would be included, but not everything. I mean, we'll have some unique items, I think, and Jim has it there. He can look at it. I had sent it to Eric earlier. That's as close as I get to knowing anything about what a legal RFP looks like. So it's a starting point.
Okay,
So,
thank
but
you.
it kind of helped me get an idea of what they look like. One thing that was in there that we're discussing, there's a link in there. They used HVS, the company that we've used for studies in conjunction with the Fargo Dome. We've used them separately for some things. I am having some conversations with them about how much they would charge us for a pro forma based on the kind of size we're giving here, so we could put a link to something like that in the RFP. And I'm waiting to hear back from them how many thousands that would cost us.
Okay.
The CVB would foot that bill. I assume I would ask the board. I would ask the board if we would. We did some work with them earlier last year before the vote, and we have worked with them before. So it would be nice to have some sort of pro forma usage report from them. You know.
Yeah.
So that's what that link would
Okay.
go to.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Hey, Charlie, one other thing for the committee to consider just in the process is whether or not you want to have sort of a two-step process where, you know, it takes a lot of money to put together a proposal and all of that, whether or not you want to, if you get 8 proposals where you can keep them fairly general and then shortlist it to 2 or 3 where you want them to really go out and drill down and get into more of the specifics. I know that was one of the other examples we looked at it on RFP. So you kind of start with a very high level schematic, and then for their final, you know, whether it's 2 or 3, you expect them to put in a lot more energy and, you know, architectural costs into knowing what exactly is it going to look like. So that's something for us to consider, for you to consider.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I have read about that, and that's probably what you want to do. So yeah. They don't have to give detailed schematics in the first response, but they have to give you their location, how they're going to deal with the space, things like that. So yeah. Okay. Eric, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I don't know how you read my mind, but I was just going to interject if we were winding down. We don't necessarily need to talk about it in depth at all, but I thought I'd touch base that you are a public entity. You might say that that the membership of which creates the whole committee, and half of you, for purposes of open meeting law, constitutes a quorum. So anytime you have a quorum of this committee talking about the business of the committee, that's something that you have to stop talking about until you have a proper notice, things like that. So, and we bump, you know, one of the challenges is just communication by email and so forth that can end up inadvertently resulting in the kind of communication that needs to be done in a regular public meeting, because you have a series of emails or something where people are talking about the substance of an issue. It's certainly appropriate to communicate by email, to schedule meetings, and to get a list of agenda topics and things like that. But if you're getting into the meat of the topic, that has to happen in the open meeting. So I just thought I'd mention that. If the city commission is going to kind of end up taking a different role than being a member of the committee itself, I'm not sure what the mayor and Michael were thinking about precisely. You know, maybe we make it clear that they're not part of the committee itself, because that affects the quorum issue and the open meeting law. No, but we can deal with that. We don't have to decide that today or anything. But if you don't, and hate to get bogged down in that type of stuff, but it's a reality we need to deal with responsibly. And I thought I'd just mention it.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So we anticipate, commissioners involved or not, that this is going to be an open meeting process. So when it comes to the email things, are we allowed to, obviously we can set up meetings, things like that. Can we share information in advance of the meetings that's going to be discussed at the meeting? And like send
Yes.
Yeah, so like the things that Mallory had printed out, we could send that out. We're going to discuss this, and it could even, does it become a public record right then when we send it out?
Yes, it does.
Also, Charlie,
Yes.
Do we have to send it to media then at the same time we send it to the committee, or just give it to them if they ask for it?
No, I think you can circulate, one-way communication is generally just fine. So you're circulating information to the group, that's fine, and there's not necessarily a requirement that it be affirmatively disclosed to the media and so forth. That's not necessarily a requirement. Obviously, if it's going to be on an agenda, the way it's handled is you put together an agenda itself, and then maybe there's a packet that goes along with it. And if possible, that can become part of the record. I don't know how the city itself is going to manage the documents that are generated by these meetings, but I think it would be wise to just assemble them in a suitable place. Whether they're on the website or not, I don't know.
I think the key is don't hit reply all. That's what our attorneys always remind us. Once you start to hit reply all, you started a meeting.
So if an individual committee member has a question about something, they can write back to whoever sent the email, but not hit reply all.
Yes.
See if there's a clarification necessary. And those emails become public record, right, anyway, if somebody asks for them. We're not, Helmut, we're not trying to do anything in secret. The whole idea is to be as open as we can, and I don't, the only issue I could see ever developing is if we ask some of the other facilities that we're going to look for information from, if they have anything proprietary, we probably should say to them ahead of time, don't give us something that can't be in the public record. But they're all public facilities as well, so I think they're all in exactly the same boat we are, so everything they have should be public already. So, I mean, the same thing with that RFP, the sample RFP, that was a public record. So I think we're okay. We're not, if we want to be out in the open about this. Warts and all, right?
Eric, what's the policy on sharing documents in like a shared folder that everyone would have access to if media has access to it? If we're sharing agendas, meeting minutes, documents that we're talking about, is there anything regarding that?
No, I mean, I think it's fine to have a repository like that that's available. Yes.
Okay.
But if someone, if the forum asked, or one of the TV stations or radio stations asked, we would have to give them access to that too, right? Yeah.
It wouldn't be.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. No secrets. Okay, so you don't want to commit to a meeting next week? Like a week from today? or-
Well, we can almost get it out this afternoon. We'll look at a meeting next week. I just want to check with the rooms and what we can do. Charlie, we'll get
Okay.
that.
All right,
Because
we'll let
the
you know as-
Meadowlark room was at one time, and it seems this room is easier for people to meet at than we'll set a time, so.
Is the time okay, Mayor? It's just the location?
The time in the morning doesn't work for some of us. The time in the afternoon would work better. If you just said 1 o'clock, if that works for most parties here, that could work, and I think that would be fine. We have legislative things after that. I think, Charlie, as you get going, you're probably going to be just an hour meeting. You're
Yeah,
scheduled today for an hour and a half, but I think that you probably would do an hour meeting.
Yeah.
And I think right now, I don't know what the chamber's schedule is for next week, but I'm looking at Kimber. If it's open at 1 next week, we could just set it if you'd like, Charlie.
And if you could do, or could we do the Red River Room? That's the other thing. It's a little more intimate.
Pardon?
If the Red River Room upstairs, does that work for a broadcasting facility? No, it doesn't. Okay, I guess we're going to be here then.
Commissioner Kolpak, is that good or out?
That's out.
Okay,
Okay, so
it'll be here.
1 o'clock next Friday? Did we just decide that?
Yeah, if that works for everybody, that's fine.
Okay, is that all right? Okay. Okay, 1 o'clock next Friday. All right, we might want to, I'll send an agenda out ahead of time and maybe pick 1 or 2 of these things that we want to attack and get going on. So,
I think you got a lot of good work done today, and if we look like those other places, how they do, that'd be very helpful.
yeah, we're going to get that info as fast
My
as we can.
curiosity on a kitchen, just for restaurant type stuff, when you say catering kitchen, is that really just a kitchen? I mean, I think Courtyard, if you have breakfast there, don't you guys have like full kitchens most of the time? What's the difference between
Yeah,
catering
yeah,
and
tell us the
regular?
difference, Taylor.
Yeah, so the catering kitchen would be a full kitchen, but you're not operating like a restaurant out of there, right? like where you're serving something, you have a big line and it's, you have orders coming through. Mostly you use it to prep large quantities and then you can bring those to different places of the building and serve that way. So it's just operationally how they work. It takes up a pretty big amount of space, but if you don't have that restaurant side to it, it kind of helps out on that end. For me, that kind of depends where the building would be in the city, right? If you're around more restaurants that are close by, I think you can probably get away with that. But if you're out somewhere where you don't have much, you have the execs at the hotel, right? They might expect a small restaurant bar in there as well.
And Shannon, you've had things at the Shack. Where do they get their, is it a catering kitchen in that area? You've served meals at that place?
Generally, there's not a catering kitchen that the caterers bring all of that in, which does highly limit you for your opportunities and what you can choose as far as, so a catering kitchen is, especially in a facility like this, I think is one of those also a requirement.
To your point, it limits what those caterers can do. An external caterer, in the case of the Shack, for example, is trucking in that food and hot cabinets, that sort of thing. Everything's largely already prepped in their kitchen, in their facility. In this case, any catering company potentially could come in and utilize this catering kitchen, right, and prep the meals fresh. There's a lot more capability for versatility in a space like that. To Taylor's point, depending on where this is built, if there's restaurants nearby or not, I would very much expect that somebody building a hotel and connecting it to this facility would have a bar restaurant type of situation built into their proposal. So
I think the question will be further on is that catering contract limited to the hotel and the people operating the hotel, or is this a preferred caterers list? And that's another whole piece of negotiation, because that is a big deal from the profitability side of a restaurateur or the hotelier to have that exclusive contract or not. So that'll be another consideration that everyone will want to look at.
Charlie and I had a conversation with, I think they were from, was it Kansas?
Overland Park.
Overland Park, yes. They had recently built a convention center, and he made a comment exactly like that, Shannon, something along the lines of one of their pain points was they had people, not necessarily passing them over, but they had 3 separate contracts that these people had to sign, and they're like, bye. Like, this is great, but it was I don't know exactly what the specifics were, if they had a preferred or if it was a requirement that they use it, but that might be something to think about on how, it's management down the road, but to have a single contract, and Kate would know this too, it's probably a lot easier to have one versus now you have to talk to this person as the contact, this person's the contact, this person is the contact. So something like that would be worth
that's,
including.
Including
not
the
even
management.
just for the caterer themselves, but really in the lens of the end user, what's going to be
Exactly.
the easiest for them to say yes, to choose here as
Exactly.
their location
Instead of them,
for yours
yes.
to say no.
Yeah.
we've got a lot of experience working in this type of realm as well on the AV side of things and event production side of things. We've got a lot of really capable companies and entities in Fargo-Moorhead that absolutely, I think, would be justified on a preferred vendor list situation for sure. I think locking it down to one vendor, especially when we're talking about a public-owned building, all that, and something, especially talking about it this early in the game, I think we want to look to a list of preferred vendors that would be acceptable in the facility to operate.
Yeah, it would be good to not necessarily limit it to one, even the operator of the hotel. We'll get into that more as we go forward. We'll see what some other contracts look like.
Right.
That'll be one thing we can check out. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you all for doing this. I know it seems like we have a lot of things to sort out, but I don't really think it's going to take that long once we get going. So the harder work will probably come at the end when things come in, and then and I know it's traditional that there's negotiating when and I don't know how you word the RFP, but obviously it'll. I saw some language about that in this one about how the city commission can pick one to negotiate with, but if it doesn't work out, then you can go back and pick another one. That's kind of the way these things work, is the way I understand it, right, Jim? Yeah.
It typically use, 1, 2, shortlist it to maybe 3, then you would start with the preferred one, and then working, with the city attorney on the actual agreement. That's going to take often well over a month just to go back and forth with different drafts. And then, but if you come to an impasse, and then you can move on to number 2.
If you narrowed it down to a short list, is it conceivable that this group could invite them all in to meet and ask them questions before a final decision, a final recommendation comes?
Yeah, I think that's where you want to get them in and see what experience they have, make sure they have site control. That's where we probably start to look at their financials, make sure they have the capability to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver, but certainly have them come in and talk about it, so you can maybe make some modifications. Maybe you like a certain aspect of it, but you want, this change, you need a little smaller, a little bigger, and then you can negotiate with them on that.
Okay, that
I
sounds great.
think, Charlie, just one last final thing. I'll be really interested to see the development of the scoring rubric or the matrix as far as what this is going to look like once RFPs start to come in. That's an interest of mine, is to see what are we going to score on? How is that going to be? How are they going to be weighted?
Yes.
Those are all things that'll be of great importance, especially in the public nature of this project.
Yeah. We'll try to come up with a preliminary list to choose from, and then maybe not assigning points, but we can discuss that at a subsequent meeting. Okay, thanks, everybody. We will see you at 1 o'clock next Friday in the same place. Thanks.